Hey, this is man-made mead. Today I'm making my first hydromel or a session mead, depending on what you want to call it. Basically, it's a mead that is less alcohol volume, so 7% or less. So what I'm doing today is I'm using, this is 5 pounds. I'm not going to use all 5 pounds. I'm going to use about 3, maybe about 3.5 pounds of honey. And then 3 gallons of water. So that's a really low honey to water percentage, but that leaves a ABV fairly low. And whenever you're introducing your yeast, if you will, whatever yeast you use, we'll get to that percent. The cool thing about these meads is they ferment really quickly, and they're done quicker than most like long aging meads. Like higher alcohol volume generally means you have to let it age for a longer amount of time. So today, this is what we're doing. I'm going to make, I would like to try something with this. It's going to be a strawberry and vanilla. So I'm going to use, later on, after this goes through the primary, I'm going to put in a bunch of strawberries and then some vanilla extract and let that sit. But the big thing is, I don't want the fermentation to keep going. I want to stop it. So basically I'm measuring out to where I only get to that about 7%. Once I get there, I'm going to kill the fermentation, or let it run its course completely, then introduce the strawberries and everything, so I just get the flavors in the secondary and no more fermentation itself. Of course, I'm going to start by getting my yeast water started so I can get that going. I'll get that going on the side, and then I will start mixing in water and honey. And I like to shake it all, so I will be shaking in a glass carboy. Let's get started. I already got my water started here in a second. I'm gonna go and start stirring and shaking. So the thing with a hydromel or a session mead is that it's less honey, which means naturally, it's hard to tell because I have a bunch of bubbles in here, the color is not going to be as deep. I've only used about a gallon of water so far, and I've already got all my honey mixed in. I did about 3 pounds of honey, because this is 2.5 right here, this whole bottle. And then I also did roughly a quarter of this, which a quarter of 2.5 is, about 0.6 whatever. So I've used about that 3 pounds. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put the rest of my water in, and then we're going to see what the ABV is at. Because right now it will probably be at a higher percentage, but we don't want it to be super high. So here's the rest of our water. Now you can really see the color in here. This color is very light, and it will darken up a little bit when I start to add my other fruits in, but for now, that's where I want it. The rest of this honey, like I said, I'm going to kill the fermentation, and then I might use the rest of this honey to back sweeten if I need to. Another thing with the session mead is I would like to carbonate it. So eventually I will be carbonating this, whether it be by force or letting it bottle carbonate over time, but we'll see from there. Now we wait a while till our yeast water is done, we introduce it, and then we are virtually done. In the meantime, we can take a quick gravity reading, so let's do that. We are at about 1.04. Yep, 1.04, which means our percent is... So our ABV right now is a possible of 5.1. I want to get that just a little bit higher, so here's what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and put just a little more honey in there and take another gravity reading. I want to get it closer to about 6. That's my goal right now. So I'm going to add it straight in and just stir, and it'll be fine. Alright, another quick hydrometer reading after adding some more honey. we're sitting at 1.05 now, which is great because at 1.05 means that we have a possible percent of now about 6.5, which is great. That's exactly where I want to be, right underneath that 7% mark in that hydromel range. Now, yeast water will go in just a second. After that, now we're done basically. This one will sit for a while and then it will ferment rather quickly, which is nice. So if you ever want to make a session mead, it's really simple. It's actually less honey per gallon of water. All right, my yeast water is ready. So what I did was I put about 6.25 grams of Go Firm Protect. If you put this in before you put the yeast in, so I took my water, I put this in, put my 6.25 grams in, let that kind of dissolve in the water, then put my yeast in. It lets the yeast kind of get ready for their journey, and so it starts to give them their nutrients and stuff like that. Now I'll talk about all these other white powders here in a second. What I want to do with this is I want to go ahead and just put it straight into here. So now I'm going to do that. Here we go. Easy enough. Normally I would be really careful about putting this in all together at once, but it's such a low, it's a lower sugar content that the yeast are not going to freak out. Now let me tell you about all these white powders real fast. Okay, so I've got lots of different powders that I use, and I like going more natural, but these powders are great for giving the yeast nutrients and everything they need to kind of survive. So the first thing I mentioned was Go Firm Protect. You put this in the water before you introduce the yeast. It gives them some nutrients and kind of gets them ready. And that's before you put it all into here. Now, I also have yeast nutrient here. Now I use 1 teaspoon per gallon, and I'm going to stagger the stagger the introduction of the yeast nutrient over time. And so I have 3 teaspoons here, and the 3 teaspoons will be a quarter of this on day 1, a quarter of it on day 2, on 3, and 4, basically to span it out over a little bit of time. Once my sugar has depleted down to that 1/3 mark, so it's at 1.05, I'm going to say about 1.03. Once I get to that point, I will add my Fermaid K in there, and that is 1 gram per gallon, so that will be just 3 grams. And this is also a nutrient that will help everything, help the fermentation, help the yeast all survive and figure it out. Okay, now last thing. This is where it gets kind of confusing. What I want to do with this, since it's a hydromel, hydromels, we want to keep them below that 7% line, so I have to at some point kill the fermentation. The way I'm going to do it, because once the yeast run out of nutrient and everything and they get through it all, basically they're not going to have anything to work with. So at that point I can try and kill the fermentation. You can't kill an active fermentation if there's still like nutrient stuff. It just doesn't work. So what I'm going to do is combine 2 different things. The first thing, a lot of people think that if you just introduce a Camden tablet or you introduce potassium sorbate by themselves, that will kill fermentation. It does not. What you have to do is wait for those nutrients to go out. Then, at that point, I'm going to crush basically 1 tablet per gallon. So I'll do 3 of these. I'll crush that, crush 3, and then I'll put ½ teaspoon, so about 1½ teaspoons of this together into some water and introduce that, and that will kill the fermentation at that point. Now, which means I can back sweeten without having to worry about the yeast coming back and taking the sugars that I run with. The most important thing is to remember, you're not going to kill an active fermentation by just throwing one of these in. So don't. You could theoretically kill it with Camden tablets, but what you're going to do is you're just going to create a mead that doesn't taste good because it has so much chemical in it. So watch out for that. Now, another thing is, when you introduce these things, after you kill the yeast, don't try to back sweeten too quickly. I would let it sit for maybe a week or 2 before you go ahead and back sweeten. And then same thing for bottling. Don't bottle it immediately after, because then you can get some weird tastes and smells through this. So that will happen about 2 weeks before I introduce my strawberries and my vanilla. Now, I'm going to plug in my aeration machine here in a second, let this aerate and get all my oxygen in, give the yeast everything they need. This was the July monthly mead, and it's going to be a hydromel, so it's a strawberry and vanilla hydromel. I'm really excited. I think I've never done a hydromel before, so it should be interesting to see how it comes out. I know it's going to be lighter, but I still think it's going to be pretty good. But if you enjoyed this video, if you want to know how to make more of these meads, this mead or any other mead, keep following me and let me know what you want to see, and also give me ideas for future meads. Thank you guys for watching. If you have questions, leave them down below. Huge thing, this would be really helpful for me. I want to create a community with you guys, so go to my Facebook page. It's down right here. I'll put it right here. But it's also in the description. Follow me on Facebook and talk to me, and let's get a community going and answer questions, things that you might have, or questions you might have in general. Last thing, Instagram, Twitter, @manmademead. And that is it. I'm very excited for this mead. I'm excited to continue to make meads. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next video.